Hello, we got interrupted in the middle of chapter 12. So let's take a deep breath in and exhale. Ivy went to her room and stood at the window, gazing into the shadows in the orange grove. She raised the harmonica and played the battle hymn of the Republic, For Fernando, the lyrics resounding with pride and love and dedication. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Okay, Nando, she whispered, forward to defend the truth. She sat on her bed and wrote him a letter. She told him about Lincoln, Maine, and Lincoln Annex, their decision to stay in Orange County instead of going back to Fresno, the orchestra, Mr. Daniels, and the flute lessons, and how she hoped everything worked out so that he could come home and put down roots. She assured him she was being a good little soldier and that he could keep counting on her. She signed her letter without mentioning the two obstacles to her family's future. One was that Kenny Yamamoto and Papa still had to sign the papers. If Kenny Yamamoto wasn't pleased with what he saw when he came, he might not sign. The other was something Ivy could fix. The other obstacle, like a sliver in her finger that never stopped throbbing. If the Yamamotos were spies, they would go to prison and their farm would be sold. In that case, what would happen to her own family? Susan had said the only way to prove the Yamamotos weren't spies was to inspect their house. Hadn't Papa mentioned they needed to do that very thing anyway? If Ivy could get inside and confirm there was nothing suspicious, she could tell Susan, who could tell her father, and that would be the end of all the spy talk. But how and when could they get inside? Chapter 13. The day after Christmas, Ivy realized she had the perfect opportunity. She and Mama were kneeling side by side on a folded blanket in front of an overgrown flower bed, prying up iris blossoms. With a trowel, Ivy dug up dirt-encrusted clump and tossed it onto a pile and a piece of burlap. What color are they? Mama considered one. They will have to bloom for us to know. I am hoping for purple with yellow tongues. Those are my favorite. What will you do with the ones we take out? Asked Ivy. They are easy to transplant. I will keep some for the side of the house, and I will give some to Mrs. Ward. The rest I am not sure. Mama, I want to plant some at the owner's house. Everything there looks so drab. Ivy, what a good idea. I wish I had thought the same. Maybe by the time they take root and flower, the family will be back to enjoy them. We can take these over and store them into the shed until I can plant them. And then nonchalantly, Ivy added, oh, and Papa said we still needed to check inside the house. We could do it while we are there. Yes, said Mama. I promised Papa I'd do that. But I have not had the chance. Since he's gone to town to buy supplies this afternoon, we might as well go over. She stood and brushed off her apron. I will get the keys to the shed and the house. Before they started through the grove, Mama grabbed a handful of clothespins from the line to pin up the blackout curtains and let in some light. The electricity is not on. Ivy heard Susan's warnings. If you go inside, be careful, because it might be booby-trapped or rigged with bombs to protect their spy stuff. Ivy didn't believe it and was ready to prove the Yamamotos were not spies. But still, should she tell Mama what Susan had said just in case? By the time Ivy had bundled the iris bottoms in burlap, Mama was halfway through the grove. Ivy hurried after her to the Yamamoto's yard. When she caught up, Mama had opened the shed and was heading toward the back door. She laid the bundle on the dirt floor of the shed and quickly made her way to the house, deciding to warn Mama about the booby traps. But she wasn't fast enough. Mama had already unlocked the back door and now stood in a perfectly ordinary kitchen that did not look one bit like it belonged to spies. Ivy took a deep breath, relieved. "Now," said Mama, pinning up a corner of the blackout curtain on the kitchen window, "we need to look inside every closet and cupboard for mouse trappings or leaking water or bird and squirrel nests," said Ivy. "Papa told me." Mama put her hands on her hips. "It is sad. No, the last time Kenneth Yamamoto left this house, his family was here." She shook her head. "Imagine how difficult it will be for him to come back to this." The kitchen table looked stark and lonely, without a bowl of fruit at its center, and the chairs tucked tight to the edges. Had Mr. and Mrs. Yamamoto sat at each end with their children between them? Which seat were Karen's and Annie's? Ivy helped Mama clip up the curtains in the living room. Boarded from the outside, the windows allowed in only slats of light. Furniture had been pushed to the center and covered with sheets. The mountainous shapes erupted like icebergs. The air smelled stale. "Why do they have blackout curtains if there's no electricity?" asked Ivy. The curtains were probably required before they were sent away. They were being good Americans. Now, at least if someone pries off the boards on the outside, they will not be able to see inside. When houses are abandoned, people do strange things. They think it is an invitation to steal. Mama inspected each window and moved to the bedrooms. The first had been stripped bare, except for the double bed frames and mattresses. Mama opened the closet. Adult clothing had crowded the pole. On the floor, a radio was pushed into the corner, surrounded by tidy rows of cardboard boxes and words written on the front: sheets, pillowcases, tablecloths. A row of work boots lined the threshold. It must have been Mr. and Mrs. Yamamoto's room. Mama pulled out a few boxes and carefully looked inside. The next bedroom was much the same, with boxes lining the closet floor. But the shelf held baseball bats and deflated balls that probably belonged to Kenny. In the third bedroom, there were two beds, where Karen and Annie must have slept. Ivy imagined them there, giggling and whispering secrets in the dark before they fell asleep, the younger one clutching her doll. Mama opened the closet, and a box with no lid toppled. Photos slid across the floor. "Oh, what a mess! I'll get them, Mama," said Ivy, curious to look at the photos. "Thank you. I'll look through the kitchen cupboards." The sound of Mama's footsteps faded as she walked away. One by one, Ivy stacked the pictures back in the box. There was one of the Lincoln School Orchestra with the Yamamoto girls performing a duet on flutes. They played the flute too? Ivy turned the photo over. Their names had been written on the back in perfect script. Another picture showed the two sisters in matching dresses sitting at a piano. There were lots of baby pictures. A young Kenny playing the violin with the words "Lincoln Spring Concert" written in the white border. Mr. and Mrs. Yamamoto standing on the front steps of the house, holding an infant. Kenny and Donald and Tom, arms around one another, holding baseball bats and gloves, grinning. Kenny and Donald in their Marine Corps uniforms, shaking hands. Kenny must have been so sad when his best friend died in the bombs. With each photo, Ivy felt pulled into the Yamamoto's lives, and heavy-hearted for all they had lost. She lifted the box back into the closet. She looked for the lid, pushing aside the hanging clothes. That's when she saw a door at the back of the closet. Why would there be a door in the closet? Ivy's imagination raced. Was it an entrance to a secret passageway? Was this evidence Susan's father was hoping to find? Were the Yamamotos hiding something? Ivy looked up. The top of the door, a flip latch, was padlocked. She shoved some of the clothing farther aside, scooted boxes forward, and found another latch and padlock near the bottom of the door. She took a deep breath. It was probably a storage room, she reasoned, for special things they would not risk leaving out in the house. Breakable or precious things. Didn't Japanese people have fancy kimonos? It would make sense to lock them up. After all, Papa said they could take to the camp only what they could hold in their arms. Mama said that people steal from abandoned houses. It made sense to lock up valuables. Ivy suddenly felt heavy with the burden of responsibility, of knowing about this hidden closet. Should she tell Mama and Papa? She thought she heard a chord, like a long exhale. She put her hand on the pocket of her dungarees and felt the harmonica. Had it played on its own? Or had Ivy let out a sigh? Or was she imagining things like Papa always said? Her thoughts skipped. Her family and the Yamamotos were linked. If there was anything suspicious in that closet and it was discovered, both families would be in jeopardy. Ivy was probably the only one outside of the Yamamoto family who knew this door was there. She was good at keeping secrets. She didn't have to tell. It would be her way of helping, of giving her family the chance to march forward together. Ivy rearranged the hanging clothes and stacked the boxes in place. "Ivy," called Mama, "unclip the curtains as you come through the house and pull the back door tight. I will lock the shed and meet you out front." "Okay, Mama." Ivy shut the closet door and left the house, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. But as she rounded the corner of the ramshackle garden, she stopped and froze. Mr. Ward's Buick idled on the street at the end of the Yamamoto's drive. Ivy could see Mr. Ward crouching from the driver's seat and peering out the passenger window as if he'd been watching and waiting. Ivy's heart thudded. He couldn't have known what she just discovered, or could he? She tried to act innocent and casual as she walked down the drive and waved, but Mr. Ward gunned the motor and sped away. Chapter 14. The next day, Ivy set out to conquer one of the obstacles standing in the way of her family's future. "I want to go back to the Yamamotos," she told Mama. All morning, she had thought of what to say, and when, so Mama would allow it. They had finished lunch, and Mama was putting on her jacket to go make bandages with the Red Cross ladies. "We were just there yesterday." "Yes, but I want to plant irises and rake the flower beds and also fix the vegetable garden for when Kenny Yamamoto comes. I've helped you before. I know what to do. Papa said if Kenny Yamamoto likes how we are caring for the property, that he will sign the agreement. And you said it would be sad for him to come home to his house that way. Also, I was thinking that when the oranges arrive and the vegetables are ripe, I could sell them at Mrs. Yamamoto's stand and buy war stamps with the money. Maybe Susan could help me. Fernando says the sooner we stop the Nazis, the sooner the war will be over. I can tell Kenny Yamamoto I plan to exchange the stamps for war bonds and give them to his father when the war is over." Mama looked at Ivy with awe. "What a generous and sensible idea! Since we arrived here, Ivy, I grow more and more proud of you. You are becoming such a mature and responsible girl with your feet on the ground." "Papa is working in the grove on the north of the house this afternoon. The extra key to the shed is in the drawer by the back door. Don't stay too late and take your jacket." Excited and relieved, Ivy stuffed the extra key to the shed in her pocket of her dungarees and ran to the Yamamotos. She gathered a trowel, a small rake, and some packets of seeds from the shed. She weeded the flower beds in front of the house and dug small holes for the iris bottoms, dropping them in and leaving just the tips to peek from the ground. She smoothed the dirt around them for their long nap in the earth. As she worked, she found herself looking up at the house and wondering about the closet. She tried to push away her curiosity. She walked to the garden, removing the wire trellises and setting them aside. She pulled up the old tomato plants and hoed the dirt into 2 long furrows. In one row, she planted carrot seeds, in another radishes. The rest of the garden would have to wait for warmer weather. In the shed, Ivy lined up the little clay pots beneath the window and planted sweet pea seeds, sprinkling them with water from a tiny watering can. As she walked back to the front yard, she looked toward the road and saw the boy on the bicycle, the one she'd seen while waiting for the bus at school. He was hunched over the handlebars, pedaling as fast as he could down the road. Ivy waved, but he didn't wave back. Where was he going? Why was he always in such a hurry? Ivy was glad she wasn't in a hurry. She slowly swept the front porch and then sat on the steps, satisfied with her work. There was something comforting about being at the foot of the sleeping house, smelling the freshly turned earth and looking at the snug bed of irises waiting to rise. Ivy lifted the harmonica and played "Angels We Have Heard on High." She closed her eyes. When she reached the refrain, she imagined a field of angels who had been sleeping in a faraway and ancient place. Purple angels with yellow tongues bursting through the topsoil, singing, "Glory in excelsis Deo." The song filled her with contentment and a sense that everything might, once and for all, be better. Chapter 15. On Saturday, Ivy was so excited to meet Susan and tell her everything that had happened, almost everything, that she was much too early. She sat in the old wagon playing "Auld Lang Syne" on the harmonica, the song her class would have played on the Colgate Family Hour. Last night on the radio, she'd heard Guy Lombardo's orchestra play it and people singing. She couldn't remember all the words, except that it kept asking the question, should old acquaintance be forgot? It had been over 3 weeks since she had moved, and Ivy had written to Araceli 4 times, but she hadn't received 1 letter in return. Mamma said mail was slow during the holidays. Papa said Araceli's family could have moved from La Colonia, too. If that was the case, why hadn't she sent a new address? Had Araceli forgotten her? Ivy was happy to have her thoughts interrupted by Susan, who ran through the grove, carrying papers and calling her name. She climbed into the wagon and sat next to Ivy. "Happy New Year!" "And to you." They hugged and filled each other in on their Christmas presents and how they spent their vacation. Ivy explained about fixing up the Yamamoto's yard and planting the war garden. "Kenny Yamamoto is coming home next weekend. If he likes Papa and how he is caring for the house and the farm, they will sign the papers, and then we can stay here forever." "You mean you might have to leave if Kenny Yamamoto doesn't like how your father's doing things?" Ivy nodded. "That's why I'm making everything look nice, and," she grinned, "I'm going to sell oranges and vegetables at Mrs. Yamamoto's stand and buy war bonds with the money. Do you want to join me? We'll be helping America." "Oh, I want to, and I don't want you to ever leave, but I'm not sure if my parents would let me. You know, because it's the Yamamoto's property." "Don't worry," said Ivy. "You can tell your father that my mother and I inspected the entire side of the house. I didn't see any secret documents or anything that could help Japan win the war." It wasn't a lie, but the hidden closet still nagged at her. Susan chewed on her lip, thinking. If it's for the war and our soldiers, maybe they'll say yes, she smiled. Our very own stand. But first, she held up the papers. Worksheets. I need to catch up in math or my mom won't let me do any extra activities, even orchestra. The air warmed. Ivy took off Fernando's jacket, spread it out in the wagon, and sat on it. She let Susan wear the purple hat as they huddled over Susan's homework. Afterward, Ivy pulled out her harmonica and played Old Lang Syne. I wish I knew what the words meant, she said when she finished. My dad told me it means time's gone by. He said it's about good memories with old friends, and that even if you're separated for a really, really long time or never see them again, you can still think about them with love and good feeling. Ivy tilted her head. Mr. Ward had said that? It didn't seem if he wanted anyone in his family to remember the Yamamotos that way. Had the war squashed all the good memories from his heart? The bell clanged in the distance. Susan gathered her things, handed Ivy the hat, and gave her a hug. I'll tell my parents about the orange and vegetable stand tonight, and that you inspected the house, and the Yamamotos aren't spies, so it's perfectly safe. Fingers crossed they say okay. Ivy waved. Before Susan disappeared among the trees, she turned and held a hand in the air. Fingers crossed. Ivy did the same. Chapter 16. Do you think he will sign? Asked Ivy as she followed Papa up and down rows and rows of orange trees. He was marking each trunk with different colored strips of cloth. Yellow if they needed to be pruned, green if they needed to be treated for leaf curl, red if they should be moved altogether. We will find out 1 week from today, Sunday, said Papa. He has only a 3-day leave. First, he will travel to the camp in Arizona to meet with his father. Then he will take the bus here to meet with me. He will arrive in the morning, spend a few hours, and I will take him back to the bus in the afternoon. Papa and Ivy got into the truck and drove to the outer groves, where Papa studied the irrigation pumps and the moats and the pipes leading to the fields. He pulled oranges from trees, peeled them, and ate a bite. Then he handed the rest to Ivy to sample while he made notes about their sweetness or juiciness. This will be ready to harvest in a few months or so. Then I can sell them. She was so excited to start and hoped Susan's parents had said she could help. Ivy looked around at the acres and acres of trees. Who will help when it's time to pick? That is the problem. I will talk to Kenneth about this. I know one farmer in San Bernardino who might loan me some workers. So many men are at war, so many women work in the factories that there are not enough people to harvest. The United States is begging for braceros from Mexico because there are not enough strong arms left in the United States. But if they had not put Mr. Yamamoto and all his Japanese workers in the camp, yes, Ivy, you are thinking the same as me, and we would not be begging for braceros. They climbed back in the truck and rambled through the groves to the road. Papa, can you drop me at the Yamamoto so I can water the garden, and I can show you the radishes? They are already up. Papa turned the truck at the stand and headed down the drive. Closer to the house, he leaned forward, peering out the dusty windshield. What is that? What is that? She asked. He turned off the motor and reached for Ivy's hand and helped her across the street. I'm not sure. Stay close to me. They took a few steps toward the house, and Ivy sucked in her breath. The front flower beds had been trampled, the irises pulled from the ground and thrown at the house, leaving splats of dirt. The porch was now littered with dirt clods and would-be irises. Ivy blinked, making sure it was real. She pulled her hand from Papa's and ran to the side of the house. Someone had rampaged her war garden with a shovel. The radish sprout had been chopped and scattered in clumps across the yard. The furrows had been flattened. She felt her throat tightened. "Papa, all of my work!" He came up behind her and put a hand on her shoulder. "Ivy Maria, I am so sorry." She ran to the shed. The window was broken. The seedlings no longer on the sill. Papa unlocked the door. Inside, the clay pots lay shattered on the ground among shards of glass. Ivy felt as though someone had punched her in the stomach. All her hard work had been ruined. As Papa herded her toward the truck, she saw what had been scrawled in red on the newly painted back door. "Jap spies don't come back." Who would do such a thing? Mr. Ward? "I don't want you coming here any more alone," said Papa. "For your safety, Ivy Maria." "But I have to clean it all up for Kenny." If he saw this destruction, surely he wouldn't sign the papers with Papa. "No, Ivy, not today. We wait until right before Kenny Yamamoto arrives, so whoever does this does not have time to do it again." "But the seedlings, the radishes." "I know," said Papa. "I will explain everything to him." Something big and fierce rose inside Ivy. "What is wrong with people, Papa? Why is someone doing this? And why doesn't anyone stop them?" Their hearts hurt. People who used to be friends are no longer friends. Neighbors are not neighbors. During a war, people feel they must blame and take sides. Hearts grow smaller. "Mama says hearts are bigger than we think." Angry tears streamed down her cheeks. Papa put his arm around her. "Ivy Maria, how did you get so wise so quickly? Where's that girl with her head in the clouds? I think I miss her a little." He squeezed her shoulder. "Can you play me something on the harmonica? That song you were going to play on the radio, perhaps. Your solo." He reached into his pocket, pulled out some coins, and sorted through them, and handed her a penny. She took the penny and hugged her Papa. As they walked to the truck and all the way home, Ivy struggled to catch her breath, still choked by the indignation, and she played a halting "America the Beautiful." And that is where we are stopping today. I will see you next chapter.